What's up out there? This is the third and final portion of my Boneshatter series, a little miniature series I'm doing covering the level 97 Boneshatter Juggernaut that I have currently in Necropolis League. So this is going to be all the different passive points that I've put on here, and I want to explain the choices that I made and why I've done certain things here. So starting off, we're going to talk about the ascendancy portion of it. This is pretty standard. You're going to take undeniable for all the accuracy rating you get. You're going to take unstoppable for the increased movement speed, cannot be stunned, action speed cannot be modified below base value, and movement cannot be modified below base value. You want to be as fast as possible. Unbreakable armor from equipped body armor is doubled. 8% of armor applies to fire, cold, and lightning damage taken from hits. The big thing with this is when you get something like this over here that shunts off fizz taken as fire damage, this is going to apply all of that to your armor. So you're just scraping chunks of damage off in different pieces, different layers. And then you're going to take untiring, which gives you a 40% increased life regen rate, 1.5% fizz damage prevented from hits in the past. And then 10 seconds is I'm sorry. That's one line. It's just on it's one sentence on two different lines. 1.5% of physical damage prevented from hits in the past 10 seconds is regenerated as life per second. You're a Boneshatter build that does a lot of trauma damage to yourself, so you want as much recovery as possible. This is a very tanky build. I did a video lastly talking about whether you should do Boneshatter Jugg or Slayer. I really like the Juggernaut version a lot better. The Slayer build just felt squishy and it didn't have near the recovery. I feel like I can get more damage and stack more trauma with this build the way it's set up than I can with Slayer. So that's why I prefer this. Also, Slayer was all life leech and it just didn't work for me in labs. I hated it. I hated doing lab runs with it. So anyway, in the build that I based this off of, I can't remember whose build it was, but the build that I based it off of actually came down through these nodes here for life and armor at the very first over to Warrior's Blood. I shortcutted that to come down here, and I don't really respec over into it. I just come down here to the start. And then typically the early game, I think I'm mostly going up to like Warrior's Blood, coming over here to Heart of Warrior, Born to Fight. And then that's like level 12 or something like that. Somewhere in that realm, you're going to start taking over here to Kinetic Impacts. Now, this one here with the two-handed mastery, you're going to get 40% increased damage with hits against rare and unique enemies. That's a lot of damage buff to those. And then we come off, I think I typically come off this way to where we go pick up Lust for Carnage, which gives increased attack speed, physical damage leached as life, 60% increased total recovery per second from life leech. We then come down here to Harvester of Foes, which gives you a big increased impale effect, fizz damage with axes. The mastery on this, the reason I like this one is the mastery gives me attacks with axes or swords, grants 1 rage on hit, no more than once every second. So you're constantly building up rage. That means you don't need to have rage support. You don't need to have whatever there's a green skill gem. You don't need to have all that. You can just build it up with this, which is very easy to build. Then you come down here to Bloodless, which gives you increased max life, and then plus 50 to life on the mastery here. Over here on Soul of Steel, you're going to get armor, increased armor, plus 1 to all max elemental res. And then on here, I selected for the mastery, you could take plus 1 to all maximum elemental resistances if equipped helmet, body armor, gloves, and boots all have armor, which I do right now. But I opted for plus 1 armor per 2 strength. I tried a different Boneshatter build that was for staves, whatever you want to say. And it stacked a little bit of armor, so I took this from that. So we've got a little bit of strength on here, 444, so I'm getting plus 1 armor for 2 strength. So I believe that's base armor, so that calculates out once you start increasing it and all that good stuff. So that's there. The way this was built originally is it came down into this section here, maybe out this way over to Precise Technique. There was a bunch of stuff over here for like freedom of movement and maybe Weathered Hunter. I stripped all of that out, and the way I league started this was different than the way this build is now. So I don't know what I'm driving at is I don't know exactly where I would go from here if I was leveling up. I would come through here, get over to Born to Fight and Kinetic Impacts early, probably come down here and pick up Lust for Carnage, Harvester of Foes, down here to Soul of Steel, Bloodless, probably get that section in here earlier than later. I've also came into this section here for Brinkmanship. This is where it kind of gets murky. I don't know where I would start putting in stuff down in this section or up here, or maybe this section off on the side here. I'm not exactly sure I would go with that. So I'm just going to go through the nodes that I've picked and tell you why I've picked them. This, I took Brinkmanship. Now this gives you 10% increased melee damage here, a little bit of increased area of effect, same thing here. And then this one gives you a 20% increased area of effect. Okay, cool. You're going to do a little bit more area damage. All right. The big reason I took this is monsters cannot block your attacks. I took the mastery on this because I was feeling like I was whiffing a lot, like just totally missing and not getting anything. I've considered coming up here to Resolute Technique where you can't be evaded. With both of those, I think every hit would just straight up hit. I'm debating on, like, if I do level 98 and 99, I may take those, debating on it. But for now, I took this one. I did try Resolute Technique for a minute. It didn't seem to make a difference. So I took those points and a couple of other points and moved it over to here and took this. Cannot block seems to do a lot better. So that's why I ended up with this. It feels weird this league, like it was a wonky change that I didn't notice last league, but I noticed this league. So I tried this out. It seems to have fixed that problem. So that's what I've got there. We come over here for Champion of the Cause and Bannerman. These increase a lot of your aura stuff. And then for the Reservation Mastery, you've got auras from skills can have a 10% increased effect on you. So those really help out a lot with like War Banner, Determination, Purity of Elements, and well, Pride if I had it turned on, but I don't. Then we come over here to Bastion Breaker. Now this gives you a big chunk of damage, 14% increased attack physical, another 14, and then over here is 30% increased attack physical damage. It's got some Overwhelm in it. From what I understand, Overwhelm phys damage doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, but the big thing on this is where I fixed my Precise Technique. Precise Technique gives you 40% more attack damage if accuracy is higher than max life. The problem is you have to keep your accuracy higher than max life. And at the moment, my accuracy is, where's my accuracy? 3181. So it's way less. Like I felt like I had to spend more time trying to work on accuracy. Plus I had to put points over here to the right side of the tree. I recaptured all the points I had over here from this and freedom of movement. And there was one, maybe in Trench. There was some spell suppression and stuff. So there was probably what, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, maybe 9 points over here. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I recaptured 14 points, moved them over to this side, put 4 of those points over here. And in this place, I get this mastery, which does 40% increased physical damage with skills that cost life. So that is the same thing, I believe. Well, this is more attack damage, so that's probably more damage overall because it's more, not increased. But this recovered a lot of points. I was able to shift some things over here, put these points into that. It's still pretty much the same damage, but I don't have to deal with the accuracy part. And I think I was getting 2 million DPS when I was on this side. With some of the changes that I've made over here, I still am 2.5 million DPS. I'm at 2.5 now, but I'm trying to think of what I was when I had Precise Technique, because I've made a whole bunch of other changes to get to this point. So this is more damage, which is probably actually would be a higher damage number in the long run than this being increased. But I ended up going with this because I put life tap on everything. I ran into a huge mana reservation problem. I had no mana for anything. So this kind of gets me away from the accuracy and moves over into that. A lot of discussion over that, but that's why I made that change and why that's there. This wheel down here, typically you come over to Wrecking Ball because you're going to get a lot of damage with two-handed weapons. I went in here and took this one. I think this might have been on other builds that I've seen, but you've got 10% increased armor per red socket in the main hand weapon and 10% increased evasion. I was trying a little bit more with the armor stacker idea on this. This isn't an armor stacker. I'm just trying to put a little bit more armor in place on this. So that's why I put that there. And then in the last, what do we get? This is level 97 I put into Executioner, so 96, 95. So level 95, 96, and 97 were these points here. These were kind of the last things I put on. I went into this side here. This gives you more increased fizz damage, more increased area of effect. But the thing I wanted to land on was Executioner, which gives 60% increased damage with hits against enemies that are on low life. I can't remember where low life is, like 55% or something like that, somewhere in that realm. Once they hit that point, you start doing a little bit more damage to them and increase the area of effect if you killed recently. So recently is like the last 4 seconds, which it says on here. Recently it refers to the past 4 seconds. So as long as you're killing a lot of stuff, you're going to get a lot bigger area, or a little bit bigger area of effect out of it. Let's see, we talked about that one. We've got Hatchet Master over here, which is just axe in general. So this one gives you 24% increased damage with hits and ailments, 10% increased attack speed, and a 20% chance to gain onslaught for 4 seconds. I also have a flask in here that when charges reach full, it gives me onslaught. Maybe it's a little redundant, I'm not sure. For the mastery, I like this mastery. Enemies killed by your hits are destroyed. Last league, I didn't have a problem with it. This last league, when let me define the problem that I'm fixing with this. And this is not something that I came up with. This is like on the build that was there, but I make sure and keep it. Enemies killed by your hits or destroyed means that anything that comes out of a chest or whatever doesn't have to explode at bodies. So anything or things that detonate bodies and stuff like that. Because there's no body there, it's gone and it doesn't explode. So that's why I like this. Now, the problem with this league is there are things that still blow up stuff on the ground, which I don't understand how there's bodies because I'm destroying them, yet there's still something exploding on the ground. Don't understand it, but that's why I picked this. And when you get those chests that explode, or whatever they're called, but whenever those things explode and detonate all the stuff around you, I died so many times to not catching that because I usually don't identify them before I open them. And then the next thing you know, I just explode. So I make sure and leave that on because anything I've killed is not going to leave a mess on the ground. So then we come over to Golem's Blood, which increases your max life and some regen on here. You could put a point up into this one here and another point up into this. I just didn't. I used those points elsewhere. But then I come over here to Cloth and Chain. This gives you 24% increased evasion, which is important if you're going for Iron Reflexes, which converts all evasion rating to armor. And dexterity provides no bonus to evasion rating. So basically I had this for a little while. That's in my gear video. I talked about like these gloves have armor and evasion. At one point I was going for armor and evasion in all my gear. I've switched over to pure armor. And the reason I had the armor and evasion gear was for the Iron Reflexes. And at some point, I think one of these things up here, I think it was this one this mastery used a +1 to all Ellie Res. You know, if you had, is this the armor one? There was one that had something, if you'd get some bonus for evasion rating. I ended up dropping all that and going to pure armor, and I ended up taking Iron Reflexes off. This point here was not doing me any good. By the time I started getting rid of a lot of the hybrid gear and working more to just pure armor, this became kind of pointless. It was only giving me like a couple hundred armor instead, or 1,000 maybe, or something like that. It wasn't a big deal. So I was able to move that point somewhere else and do other things with it. But this Cloth and Chain does a really good job because you get plus 12% to all Ellie Res, so it kind of helps out there. And you get 24% increased armor out of it. Now, I've also taken, for the Mastery, this is another thing that's good about this one, is on the Mastery side, every 4 seconds you regenerate life equal to 1% of armor and evasion rating over 1 second. So I got this from Jorgen, I think. He had that in one of his videos talking about it. I was watching his Boneshatter build. I stole this from that. This is a really solid thing because every 4 seconds, you'll notice that my life regen goes from 804 and to 2000. So it just goes up massively for 4 seconds. So you get this massive life regen out of it. And that's very helpful every once in a while. So if we go back up the tree, we'll go up this direction here. For a moment, Juggernaut, you get a massive increase of armor, 24%, 8% increased max life, and then these all have... why am I on AFK mode? I don't think I turned that on purpose. Okay. Oh, maybe because I'm not moving. I haven't moved in a while. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, okay. So I just stood in place too long. Okay, so we take Juggernaut. Normally we come up this side of the tree and pick some other stuff up along the way and come up this way. We would pick up Harpooner, but I found that I could come this direction and come into this cluster of stuff here. I still take Juggernaut and I still pick up both sides of it because it increases armor and max life. And then on this one, I've gone back and forth on the mastery that I use here. Like I said, you could use the +1 to all max Ellie res if you want, but I went back to this one. This was on one of the builds that I used. 20% increased armor per second. You've been stationary up to a maximum of 100%. So it just increases the amount of armor you've got, which shows up from when I move and when I stand still. So I've got 52,000. If I stand still for a little bit, it jumps up quite a bit. As it ramps up, I get 64,000. So 12,000 armor. And it just helps out. You're going to be standing there a lot and it comes up fairly quickly. So use that. Then we come over to Barbarism. I believe that one's, well, I think that might be a new one that I've added for this from this other build that I tried. This gives you increased max life, max fire res, and 8% to fire res. You also get some increased Ellie res and life on both sides of it. Come up around here. This is definitely from the other build that I was the other Boneshatter build that I looked at for a little while. Hardy gives you 15% increased life regen 1.8% of life per second. And then I also took in Recovery Mastery, regenerate 50 life per second. So a lot of regeneration in here. In the internal side here, there's not really, I kind of came over here into Slaughter and Cleaving for a little bit. They did not do the amount of damage that I was expecting. And I was able to switch some things around, mostly down to this section down here and get this, maybe not Wrecking Ball, but the Executioner in this side, maybe this over here. In POB, it showed that these did not do as much damage as this section over here, so that's why I've got that. But I was able to come over here and take this +5 all Ellie res, 14% increased armor, and then Spike Bulwark gives you 28% increased armor, a little bit of Fizz Reflect, which I don't really care about, but the increased armor is nice. I also, if I wanted to put another point into Diamond Skin, that's another +15% all Ellie res. I had that at one point, but I got my, because I'm using, let's see here, because I'm using Purity of Elements, I was able to take this point out and put it somewhere else. Continuing on, we've got this little wheel around here. So you get Butchery, which gives you two-handed damage, +20 to strength, and then increased attack speed. Mainly, I took this for the increased attack speed, but it does build up your strength a little bit, so you can strength stack a little bit. You also get two-handed damage over here, and damage with ailments, a little bit of attack speed. And then you've got more ailment damage, increased fizz damage, more increased fizz damage with ailments, stuff like that. All that built up into there. Coming up into this section, you've got increased armor, increased max life, and regenerate 1% of life per second with combat stamina. I really like that. And then you've got increased armor and max life and a little bit of regen off coming into here. Mastery-wise, I didn't really feel the need to take one, but I'd probably do the +1 max Ellie res, maybe. That would be a good one to take there. I used to stop at that point. Like I was stopped at that point for a little while, from like level 80 to 85, 90, somewhere in there. Then I noticed that this up here, this Righteous Fury, has some really cool stats to it. So if you go into this, you've got 12% increased melee damage here, here, and here. Then you've got Righteous Fury, which has a 10% chance to create consecrated ground on melee kill lasting 4 seconds. Okay. The big one is 40% increased melee damage with hits at close range. So you remember I said something about coming off of this over here and getting rid of Precise Technique and freeing up a bunch of points. I noticed that this was up here. I was like, you know, 40% increased melee damage with hits at close range is pretty much all the attacking that I'm doing. I don't do anything at far because I don't have anything that's projectile based, so everything's close. I thought that's 40% increased damage there. And it also gave me this attack mastery with 5% increased attack speed per enemy in close range. So you actually speed up for the more enemies that are in range. So I thought that was a really cool bonus to go up into there. That covers everything in here. We talked about Born to Fight and Heart of the Warrior earlier. Coming down this way, most of the time you would go through here to go pick up precise techniques. So some of this comes from that, like Destroyer, you get 25% increased fizz damage, some more chance to stun, more increased attack speed. I could come off of here for another little bit of attack speed. There's, if you go around the wheel, there's a lot of increased damage on there. Master of the Arena gives you life regen, melee fizz damage, strike range. You're doing more damage, or your area damage opens a little bit. Area of effect, maybe not area of effect, but you know what I mean? Your strike range, you're going to attack in a further distance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. A little bit of strength, so you're stacking a little bit more strength on there. You also come through here with increased life on both sides of bravery, which gives you increased evasion and armor with increased max life. And Art of the Gladiator, which gives a big 10% attack speed, 10% global accuracy, ignore all movement penalties from armor, which is big because you don't have to slow down for any of that, and a little bit of dex. So I don't think I would change this section at all because it's really good. If I was to work on shields, there is a shield section in here for a deeper delve experience. I would probably go into that maybe. I'm not sure. You could also come up here to max endurance charges, frenzy charges, stuff like that. There's a socket here. There's these cluster jewels you can come off of. I thought there was another one over here. But there's some sockets you can come into if you want. Over here, some more endurance charges. I've not really bothered with those. I tried them for a little bit, but this combination of stuff seems to work out better than what I had with those. I'm an SSF, so everything, all my cluster jewels and stuff, I have to craft. And if I don't craft them very well, they don't do as well. And I just wasn't really figuring out how to rebalance the passive tree to get there. So to close all of this out, you'll notice that I have this in here. We come off to +5 all Ellie res, +1 to max fire res with the max fire res again. In probably both of my videos are, well, in the gear video, I talked about this having 6% of physical damage from hits taken as fire damage. And we looked at this up here where you've got Unbreakable with your armor applying to fire, cold, and lightning damage from hits. This increasing your resistances helps out a lot. There is lightning and cold on here. I did not put points into those, but the prismatic skin gives you another +2. So I've got like +4% to fire from this. There's 1 there, 2 there. I think we had some somewhere over here. So we're getting probably 4% increase max from the passive tree itself. The big one that I take in the middle here is your elemental resistances cannot be lowered by curses. I used to think this applied to mapping, but it doesn't seem to apply to map modifiers anymore. If it did, I thought it did last league. I thought I tested it and it looked like it, but it does not appear to this league. So either it was a bug last league or I just made a mistake. So if I was to change this, I might swap it down to the corrupted blood cannot be inflicted. That would let me change my Pantheon a little bit because I believe I've got this Pantheon. For Pantheon, I guess we can talk about that while I'm here. I've got Soul of Lunaris, which gives a little bit more damage reduction and movement speed for each enemy nearby. Avoid projectiles, reduced elemental damage if you've been hit recently. Stuff like that. I think you would typically go over here to where you can't be stunned, increase stun and block recovery, chance of void being frozen. But because I'm running Purity of Elements, I don't have to worry about Ignite, Chill, Freeze, or Shock. So because I've done all that, I could actually switch this Pantheon from Brine King over to Lunaris. So that's why I've done that. I don't think any of the other ones... I looked at like the Solaris one where you can increase fizz damage when there's only one enemy nearby. That might be kind of cool. But I don't really think this applies. And I don't really think this one applies damage over time, stuff like that. I mean, maybe they could be used somewhere, but I feel like that's the one that I would use right now. Might go to Soul of Tukahama, which gives you life regen while stationary, because you're going to be stationary a lot, and then 3% additional physical damage reduction per second you've been stationary. The thing is, once you go into damage reduction, like I have physical damage reduction of 90%, which is max. Once your armor's up high enough, that's as high as it goes. I don't think that extra 3% you're going to get from the Pantheon adds it to 93%. Now, maybe if it reduced, it would make up for some of the reduction. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but if my estimated physical damage reduction is already maxed out at 90% and it's not going to go any higher, I don't think that Pantheon is going to help. So that's kind of why I've ended up with the Pantheon choices that I have. So anyway, rather than being one giant video, I broke this up into 3 chunks. That will do it for this little series, but I wanted to talk about this build. I will link a POB. I forgot to mention that in the other 2 videos. I will have the POB linked in all the videos as of the current build that is in the video here if you want to look at it. If you've got critiques for it, any ways I could improve it, or maybe if you want to just play it and check it out. This is basically the build that I am going to start next league with, unless we get drastic changes like with the automation and call to arms gems we had this league. And yeah, so in previous league, we would have also came over here to what is now Warlord's Call. I mentioned that just because I'm thinking about it. I did not bother with it. I don't need to grant buffs to my nearby allies, so I don't need to worry about it. That's why another reason you came up this section here. So anyway, that will do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.